Hey everyone, welcome to the latest episode of the SaaS Sessions podcast. Today we have Tom Drummond on the show with us. Tom is founder and managing director at Heavybit Industries. They're a VC fund and they've backed amazing dev tech startups like SNYK, PagerDuty, and more. Hey Tom, such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Hey, Sunil, good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing good, Tom, and like for listeners who are just tuning in, I think we like Tom and I were facing a lot of technical challenges, just getting on this call, and I think we faced them like quite a bunch, and we were just talking about how important it is like for AI to fix all of these like small nuances. Like these are very like day to day challenges, but I'm sure like there is the impact of this is magnitudes, right? But Tom, like all these challenges aside, I hope like we don't encounter them in the in the recording. But if we do, like for you and for the listeners, like please bear. But like great to have you on the show, Tom. I gave a very short intro about you and Heavybit, but why don't you get us started with telling more about yourself and also about Heavybit?
Yeah, sure. So let me start with Heavybit and the firm. We are a early stage enterprise software fund. We've been around
Mm-hmm.
now for about 10 years. And as you say, we focus a lot on sort of DevX and dev tools.
Hmm.
Today, we invest sort of across the spectrum of enterprise software with a real focus on, you know, companies and founders that are building technical products for technical users,
Hmm.
whether that's developers or data analysts or engineers or ops people. We care about the infrastructure or the plumbing. We care about the kinds of tools and software that other engineers and other people use to build on top of. Right now, yeah, we're investing out of our latest fund. We write checks from $500,000 all the way up to $5 million and we'll invest on a pitch deck and an idea. We'll invest in a founder who's starting out on their new journey, all the way through to kind of Series A stage companies. So,
Hmm.
earliest of seed all the way through to Series A. And yeah, we're based here in San Francisco, but investing sort of all over the world, in portfolio companies across all continents. Yeah, so that's the firm. As you said, I'm the founder and co-founder and managing director here at the firm. My,
Hmm.
my background's maybe not that interesting. I did software engineering and computer science at Cambridge. I did software engineering at a startup for a little while, but then for most of my career, I've been in venture capital, working
Hmm.
for a European fund before coming out to California and setting up Heavybit as my own firm.
Nice, nice. Great, Tom. And I think you've been running Heavybit for close to 13, 14 years now, right?
Right.
I think very good. I think you've seen like a couple of intersection points in tech, particularly, right? But the one that we are seeing now is very interesting. And the topic for today that we're going to discuss is like how we are moving, away from clicks and moving towards conversations which are like more human way of communicating, right? And how the software should change its communication with human to be more human, right? Like basically we had like GUI before, then it moves to we had like code, and then the DOS interface, and then it moved to GUI and clicks, and now it's more like conversational where you can just chat with the system or just talk to it like with voice
Yeah.
and get stuff done, right? So over all your all these years of you running Heavybit, right, and personally as well, like we have seen a traditional a shift from traditional point and click interfaces to a more conversational and human friendly experiences, right? So
Yep.
from your perspective, like what do you think is driving this evolution right now, and how does it change on how we interact with software?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, the underlying cause for like what's driving this is really just this current generation of large language models.
Hmm.
And the emphasis there is kind of on the language, right? These are large AI models, large transformer-based models that are great at maybe not interpreting, but certainly representing language and being able to play that back in a way that um, it makes sense and is sort of very natural to other humans. It's probably the biggest single change I've seen almost kind of in my lifetime, right? Like
Hmm.
when if you think about the size of the or the number of users that were interacting kind of with computers or with technology in general, go back 40 years and computers were still very expensive machines and they were sort of reserved for kind of business cases and there wasn't really kind of much of a presence of the laptops didn't exist in the same way. um, and then we've steadily seen, as you pointed out, kind of the interface change, and that interface change has made computing technology in general just that much more accessible to a much wider audience.
Hmm.
40, 50 years ago, you had to be an expert in the field to know how to type in cryptic commands or press the right sequence of buttons to get the computer to do what you want. That became we saw a step change in like the addressable market of users or the addressable user base when people introduced GUIs and graphical user interfaces really kind of came to the fore. That just made using a computer accessible to a much sort of wider audience. And then we had the mobile revolution, and that put that same GUI interface and with the windows and the boxes and the buttons into everybody's hands and not just on their laptops or on their desktops. Um,
Hmm.
but over that same period, we've still seen that it is this same modality. There's a window, there's some text on it. You get to interact with it visually with a mouse or with your finger on a phone, and that's all for since really, GUIs have had wide adoption or seen sort of kind of mainstream adoption. That's been the only real interaction.
Hmm.
There were some experiments with Siri or Alexa Home and things like that, Google Home.
Hmm.
But these generation of large language models have or are making computing much more accessible. They allow you to interact with software in a much more naturalistic human way.
Hmm.
And that's just going to have a huge change. And probably for me, the biggest thing is really around kind of the ubiquity of computing.
Hmm.
So, before I used to have a screen. If I wanted to interact with a computer, I had to
Hmm.
have a screen. And having high quality natural language interpretation, having high quality natural language playback means that I am free from having a screen. I don't need to have, uh, you know, a 2 inch by 5 inch thing to look at in order to
Right.
interact with computing. I have just my voice and my ears. And
Hmm.
I think, that's going to be it much more ubiquitous. We're going to see computing in all new areas, different kinds of devices, different platforms that we're building on top of. But it's really, as I say, underlying all of that is that next generation or current generation of large language models that's enabling all of this.
Nice, nice. That's very interesting, and I do see like a lot of companies and a lot of people like adopting it and making it more and more mainstream, right? I mean, like just to share something personally, like we use HubSpot as our CRM, right? Like where I work, and I have like Claude on my desktop, right? So I don't necessarily like have to log into HubSpot and you know like view something. I have HubSpot MCP connected to my Claude, and then I just go into Claude and just ask like, hey, what are the new leads that have come in, and can you show me like how we are doing, leads, inbound leads, like week on week, month on month, and it just create like beautiful charts and graphs for me, right? Like I don't have to technically go and create those dashboards and stuff, and it allows me to like publish those as artifacts, then which I can take the link and share it in Slack or whatever. And if I have my email MCP connected, like I can just ask Claude, like, can you email this to like my CEO and like
Yeah.
CCXYZ people, right? So like I don't have to leave the Claude interface to essentially get my work done, right? Like I mean, it's too early, I would say, like but like but where we have all the tools that I use like into Claude, until that happens, like I still have to have a browser where I go and do things. but at least for a few things, like I do see like these conversational interfaces are becoming like more and more mainstream with like widespread apps.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're going to see for the next several years. Before we kind of
Mm,
get to this maybe longer term vision of just like this, ubiquitous computing that sort of surrounds you and you interact with in sort of natural ways, very human ways. We have this half step where,
mm,
yeah, as you say, the interfaces that we interact with have a language. Um, like the GUIs that we interact with have a language interface between them. So you
right.
can tell, or you can, type a prompt, or you can talk to Claude or whatever, and say, "Here are the things that I'd like to do."
Mm,
Um, and that's interesting for me on sort of two dimensions. One is it increases the accessibility. So to your example
mm,
of HubSpot reports, before and maybe you wouldn't have known how to do that, or that if you wanted to get that done, you would have to go to a HubSpot expert and say, "Hey, how
mm,
do I generate a report with all of this information in this format?" But you don't. And so that's
mm,
made that much more accessible. And then the second sort of axis or dimension that we're thinking about is just it reduces toil. When we talk
mm,
about toil, we mean just kind of the drudgery of
mm,
everybody's job or everybody's
mm,
day life, the handle turning that you have to do to get whatever it is that you need done. Um, and that I think is also kind of the other interesting aspect of this is it doesn't just um, let you do new things. It makes you much better at all the things that you're doing today. Because as you pointed out, like if you
mm,
if you if you want to know these things, or if you had to go through all this grunt work of pulling data together, or the very boring menial tasks, AI is now smart enough that it's able to take that toil, that hard labor, that hand turning of the crank out of your day-to-day life and free you up to do much more interesting things.
mm. Totally. Yeah. And so what do you think, Tom, like then happens to like, the design, right, of these softwares, right? Like and user engagement like with these softwares, right? Like if more and more, I know as we talked about, right? Like it's too early and it's too early to say that hey, this will become the new norm, right? Like as GUI became the new norm, like it did happen like overnight, or it didn't happen in a year, right? It took many years for GUI to become a norm. And I think now it feels very much molded with how humans think of software. Like when you think of like, hey, you have to go and fill a form for,
Hmm.
apply for a driver's license. So immediately, like, hey, you're going to open a browser, go to the website, like click some buttons, like go to a form, fill the form and get it done, right? But I think the world would be moving towards like, hey, I just maybe call a number, which is an AI agent for license, and I just talk to them. I call that number, I talk to them, they ask me information, and I just share it. I fill the form, right? Like I'm in line, like whatever happens next happens. So like what essentially is missing in this, the new world that you're moving towards, is the design of the like software, like the GUI itself, right? So how do you think like SaaS companies should approach like product design and user engagement, in this new world that we're moving into?
Yeah, well, look, you're seeing some attempts at trying to change those interfaces already
Mm,
today. The simplest thing being like adding a chat box on the side of your website, right, to give you some um, some way of interacting with the website from a prompt kind of basis.
mm,
Um, I I think that's just a really sort of temporary solution. Um, Honestly, I think if you're serious as a company or as a startup about adopting AI, or about building a product for this future, you kind of have to fully rethink what the not just the interactions, but the sort of end-to-end experience are.
mm,
Right. So, to your point, it may be that the best SaaS product isn't like a GUI. The best SaaS product or the best SaaS interface, it's a phone number, right?
Correct.
And that your service that you're selling, or the software that you're selling as a service, is access to that phone number where you can call and it can go and take tasks. It can go and do tasks for you. I don't think that that's going to fully replace the need for graphical user interfaces. There's still lots of examples, lots of cases where
Mm,
it's important to have a visualization, right? Like visual representations of things can communicate lots of information very quickly to humans. We're very good at looking at a page and interpreting it. Every second of
mm,
every day, we are interpreting our environment using our eyes. And, and, and so, I don't think you can throw away the website or throw away
mm,
the app or throw away the front end. You have to just rethink kind of what its purpose is, and
mm,
maybe it's not the primary interaction mode. Maybe it's a supporting mode of
mm,
what becomes the primary interaction mode, which is your voice and the communication that the phone call that you have, or the recording that you provide, and the role of the user interface is to
mm,
provide maybe trust or verification or confidence that your voice commands, that your conversation is being interpreted correctly, acted on correctly, and sort of followed through. I think one of the big issues today with some of these large language or some of these voice-driven and language-driven products is just there's just not enough trust. Like I don't I wouldn't trust a service that says, to your point, using a driver's example of going and getting my renewing my driver's license, I
mm,
just wouldn't trust the AI to do that correctly. I kind of need to see that it's done it
mm,
correctly. I kind of need a piece of paper or a visualization or a website that says, great, here's all your information that you've just told me. Here's
mm,
where it is in the chain and here's where it's submitted. But I don't, because without that, if an AI just tells me, "Great, I've done your driving license for you," I feel I feel it uneasy, right? Um, and so I think again, you maybe that the graphical user interface serves as a visualization, much more as an interaction than an
mm.
interaction, and as providing support, evidence, and trust of what becomes the primary mode of interaction, right?
So do you think, like, is it really GUI, like, where you want to see like it's actually submitted, or is it just that it sounds too good to be true, right? Like, I mean, like all the things that like or many of the cases like where humans have or how humans deal with the world is like to do something they need to cross like a lot of hurdles to get there, right? So nothing is easy, and that's how just the world has been built in, right? So I mean, you said it right, like it's too easy and it's too good to be true. So is it that, or do you think is it like really the GUI? Because whether you see it or not, like maybe you get a text message after you finish the call with the AI agent on call, and you see it like, hey, it's submitted and here are the details, right? Like, and you see the text message, and maybe that makes you feel confident and build trust, like, okay, yeah, they've done it. And maybe there's another call like, hey, is your spelling like name and everything is correct, just reply one or say yes and it's done. If not, then maybe say two and get on a call again and fix it, right? So I mean, I'm just saying, like, a lot of these things like have been like way too complex with clicks, and it becomes very easy with having a conversation because it's a human to human thing, right? So do you think it's really GUI that builds the trust, or is it just like it's too it's you cannot build trust because it's too good to be true?
I think some of it's cultural, generational,
Hmm.
right? Uh, uh, I was brought up in an era where we were told, "Hey, you can't trust Wikipedia," right? And I think these days Wikipedia is viewed as one of the most reliable sources kind of on the internet, and that's just frankly a generational change.
Hmm.
And it'll probably be the same way. I think kids growing up today or people entering the workforce today, they're maybe much more comfortable with the responses that are AI or responses that a large language model gives them than
Hmm.
someone who's seen them being rolled out, right? Like who's had to deal with bad answers and like who's a domain expert and sees AI or a large language model generate hallucination after hallucination and is more skeptical of that. So some
Hmm.
of it is just time. But I do think that you know you um, humans sort of want to have guides. They want to be, you know, the reason I part of the reason that people value lawyers and value doctors is not just the advice that they give, but it's
Hmm.
the confidence that they have in that someone is taking ownership of that advice. It's like, look, the
Hmm.
lawyer may be downloading a document off LegalZoom and sending it to you, but I'm still willing to pay for that lawyer to provide that service because I know he's vouching for it, right?
Hmm.
The doctor is sort of my, I look to him or her as my guide and my sort of Sherpa through that experience. And I think you have to have sort of the same thing when it comes to AI. Like it's going to churn information out at you. Like, where do I get that confidence that this is the right information? How do I know that you've done the right
Hmm.
thing for me? I think the other thing to
Got
think
it.
about as well, though, is just going back to this kind of point of toil, right? I think you have to think, people building these companies or you're going to have to do a lot more for your customers, right?
Hmm.
A lot of people, what people provide is actually generates work, right? Hey, yeah, I've got to fill in this form, I have to do this thing to interact with to get some outcome that I want to get my driver's license, for example. But if that work is diminished to like a 20-second phone call,
Hmm.
then what else are you doing, right? And so
Hmm.
it's not enough that you just have this, hey, it's easy to interact, but you've reduced the amount of labor that's required. And so kind of the value in the platform goes down as well, right? You actually have to do a lot more for people. You have to not just, give them the
Hmm.
driving license, but, you have to, I don't know, like coordinate with the passport office, and you'll have to make sure that you're updating your postal address, or that you're
Hmm.
you get your prescription from your optometrist, so that's on your driver's license too. Like, you're going to have to think about doing a lot more for your users
Hmm.
if all that you were doing in the past was giving them a form to fill in, or all that you were doing in the past was generated labor,
Hmm.
rather than just sort of delivered.
Hmm. Makes sense. Yeah. And I do feel like at the end of the day, it's easy for humans to trust humans than for humans to trust an AI or a robot or an agent or whatever like this is called, right? So
Well,
uh,
today it is. Maybe that'll
yeah.
change. Maybe, people
Hmm.
be worried about the humans being the unreliable narrator
Hmm.
in the future, and AI being putting more faith in AI. I think you're, you know, starting to see some of that kind of happen already, but yeah, who knows?
Hmm.
Today we still trust humans more than we trust the computers.
Totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So moving on to the next thing, right? So as and all of this, like, is just making means that making the system or the workflow or the agent or the software itself like intelligent, right? Like the more intelligent it becomes, the more ways it can handle conversations, the more integrated it is in like different places, as you said, right? Like if it's not just the license that I'm applying, but it's also like it might affect like three other things that are integrated with the license, right? So like coming back to SaaS, right? Like as SaaS companies like start to become more and more intelligent, and they build more intelligence driven products, right? So what key like challenges do you think that they should overcome, right? So one is obviously building trust is the one that we talked about, but do you think like there are any other challenges that they need to overcome, right? Another challenge that I feel is like making people come inside the app, right? Like because if you are having an MCP server or like if an MCP exposed, like people will stop logging into apps, right? That's another challenge.
Yeah,
So
I
what?
think I there are some pretty fundamental questions around pricing models and engagement that I think people are going to have to answer. What does it mean to have an active user if there's no website to log into, kind of thing?
mm,
And as you point out, what does if you have an MCP server, then all the integrations or whatever is agentic. Um, I, I do think that sort of MCP piece is super interesting because I believe that we're about to see um, in the same way that we saw a
mm,
whole cottage industry around SEO and search engine marketing. We're going to see the same thing, or a version of it, for large language models and agents,
mm,
right? As we delegate more of our work, more of our activities to agents that act on our behalf or with our support,
mm,
um, those agents are going to need to maybe discover tools. They're going to need to find out which tools are best for the user, right? And they
mm,
they may be tasked with choosing different services, different MCP servers to use.
mm,
And so there's going to be this, if you're building a startup or SaaS startup, and you want to be, I don't know, let's say you have an API for identity verification, right?
mm,
And maybe it's for hiring. So you sell to hiring managers who get to come into your website, type in someone's social security number or phone number and say, do this identity verification for me. Well, if that process is now just part of a hiring agent's activities. It's like, oh, I have to, the agent reads the resume, the hiring agent, does the identity verification, the hiring agent delivers the so educational test or the technical test, the hiring agent gathers feedback. If it's doing all of these things and picking all of these tools, how do you make sure that the one it picks is yours? How do you make sure
mm,
that you're providing not just number one, you're not just providing a great product for a user, you're providing a great product for an agent. And
mm.
second to that, how do you make sure that you're the tool that the agent discovers? How do you make
Correct.
sure that you get distribution in front of those tools?
Mm,
um, and I think, for me, this is kind of exciting because, like, we invest a lot in API-based companies, right? We love people building APIs, particularly APIs that interact with sort of the real world. And we just see the usage of those APIs going up and up and up as, again, it becomes much easier. The hurdles to adopting them go down and down and down because the AI, the agent, is able to just understand immediately how to make a MCP call, how to make a API call.
mm,
So I think the couple of the big challenges going forwards are going to be for founders and startups. It's like, how do I build not just for the user, but
mm,
for larger a larger number of agentic users or agents accessing my platform? And how do I
mm.
make sure I am the tool of choice for my domain, for my market?
Yeah.
So I do think, yeah, as you say, there's like lots of interesting
Challenges.
challenges for people building these
Mm.
coming up.
Nice, nice. And I think good point. You mentioned like businesses will not only have to sell to humans, but also like sell to these agents, right? Sell their APIs or sell their platform to these agents so that
Yeah,
agents be able to trust this API, and then agent will have their own thinking capability, I guess. Like, why should I use this and not somebody else, right? And and um and that's where like the AEO you mentioned comes into play, right? When agents search for this, like where do they search, and how to make sure like your things rank for them, right? There's like another
yeah,
search engine for agents, something like that. You never know.
yeah, yeah,
So interesting. So looking at this, like it becomes like a super competitive landscape where you're trying to sell to humans, you're trying to sell to agents, and all companies like have their own, let's say, buying agent, discovering agent, and there are companies who have sales agents as well, right? Like so, but taking a step back from there, like in this competitive landscape, like how can like the SaaS business differentiate itself right? In an era where like all these AI capabilities that are becoming more and more widely available and commoditized, right? Like how then where does the differentiation comes into play? Like how do you compete with others? Like what's your mode, right? So do you have any thoughts on that?
There's a sort of um, there was a internal email that came out of Google saying that there are no moats,
Hmm.
which I think is an interesting, or no moats in AI, which I think is an interesting uh, discussion. I do think the it's become harder to build a moat. Honestly, I think the first and best thing that startups companies can do is leverage these tools themselves to ship faster. I think we're at a period in history where we are resetting expectations about what is possible.
Hmm.
And the companies that succeed are the companies that aggressively and creatively adopt these kinds of tools. The companies that are willing to reimagine not just the product that they're offering, but their own operations. Like,
Hmm.
do you need that many people to go and be salespeople? Can you provide better top of funnel with, a marketing agent or a sales agent?
Hmm.
Are there elements of toil and chores that have to happen in your organization that would be much better performed or could be streamlined dramatically by the intelligence or judicious use of agents or AIs or large language models?
Hmm.
I think the question about what's people's moat going to be has to be second to are we building something that people want in this new future?
Hmm.
um there's no point like worrying about a moat if somebody else, some other startup, is just shipping a brand new interpretation or brand new vision for like how to work in this new world.
Hmm.
um I think I think we don't want to see founders get too hung up on a moat. I think they have to be very sort of execution oriented. Um, but yeah, right now it's mostly sort of free for all. It's just really resetting expectations about what's possible, and in that environment, the main thing that you have to work on is just shipping fast, shipping product quickly.
Nice, nice. I think really, really good advice for anybody who's building out there to just go and think like how they should approach, right? And probably if they're raising, like maybe their investors are asking, right, like what's your moat and how do you defend, or how are you going to compete, right? Like, so I think this is what I think this helps them have a good perspective on how they should think of coming up with an answer to this question from maybe their board, their investors, or pretty much anybody.
Yeah, look, I think, um, I've sort of been saying this for a while now, but um, even early stage investing uh, is becoming more of momentum investing.
Hmm.
You can think of like different schools of investing at sort of the early stage or across the sort of venture spectrum, but there are definitely firms that are fundamentals sort of focused. They're looking at the market or the founders, and they're making an assessment whether this company is whether this team is good or not. And then there are others that just all they look at is the momentum. And the
Hmm.
whole investment strategy is I'm going to pick the biggest and the fastest moving, and I think they'll be the winner.
Hmm.
That used to happen a lot at the late stages of venture capital, right? And you saw some of sort of kind of how that can go wrong in 2021 and 2022 with some crossover investors and some very large funds being raised and just like throwing hundreds of millions, billions of dollars into companies that could not sustain that growth. But
Hmm.
we see it across the board now. Across every stage, it's like growth solves all problems. Like if you're
Hmm.
growing quickly enough, if you are seeing usage go up, if you are growing faster than your competitors, the revenue is growing faster than everybody else. It doesn't really matter today about your moat, right? Like that's what investors, I think, are looking for. There's some bounds to that. Like, you can't grow into the ground. You can't spend $1 to earn 50 cents, right? Like, you need sort of positive unit economics and things like that. But I would say to even the earliest stage founders, you can't undervalue rapid growth. They can't just like underestimate how investors will feel about seeing explosive growth at your company, regardless of whether or not you have clear, articulated, already defensible moat today. So
Yeah.
I think you should, worry more about that than the moat aspect.
So I think momentum is the mode then. Like, if you have the momentum, you're in the right category. You're in the right industry, solving a real problem. All the fundamentals are ticked, and now you're talking about like what's your mode, and then like company A has like more momentum as opposed to company B. Like, even though company B has a slightly better product, I think the one with the momentum can and momentum in not just like revenue growth. I feel like momentum is also like how fast the team is growing, how fast they're shipping things, and how fast they're releasing like new features. And like, it's momentum across, right? Like, I don't think
Yeah,
it's like limited only to the revenue part.
no, there's absolutely like lots of
Mm,
dimensions to momentum to think about,
mm,
whether that's the size of your community or the number of API calls,
right.
whether that's, yeah, as you point out, the kind of shipping velocity or how the product is expanding.
Mm,
Um, you know, you I guess it's true that you can't be without a moat forever. Or
yeah.
to put it another way, um, if switching costs are low, your growth will always be sort of temporary.
Mm,
Right? If it's possible to swap out your product for somebody else's at no cost, then customers will migrate to the lowest cost product, right?
mm,
And they'll do that quickly, and so your growth won't be sustainable because at some point everyone will say, "Well, I can pay $10 over here, I can pay 10 cents over there. Cool, I'll just switch." And what stops people from doing that is some, either explicit or kind of implicit switching cost. Like, an
mm,
explicit switching cost might be, well, I got to take all my data and I got to spend all this time and energy getting that transferred over there. Even that kind of moat's going down because the AI can do a lot of that data management, data transfer, and do that intelligently, or do
mm,
that in, what we used to call sort of a fuzzy approach. Um, uh, um, but there are implicit, costs too, and that's often, well, I'm losing value. Like,
mm,
if I switch from provider A to provider B, but provider B doesn't provide the full functionality or doesn't do all the things I want as quickly as possible, then I'm losing out in some way.
mm,
And the switching cost there is just that, like, I get a sort of worse experience, right? I get less value for what it is that I'm paying for.
mm,
Um, so, you know, momentum is not a solution for all time,
mm,
but momentum is what matters today,
mm,
right? And if you don't have momentum, no one cares about what your moat might be. You won't even be able
mm,
to build one. So you need a story, you need a plausible way of how you stop customers from, switching, or how
mm,
you are able to own not just, say, large enterprise customers, but also the long tail of users as well. So, you basically, it becomes a winner take all market, and you saturate, every scale, every customer at every point on the spectrum. Um, but yeah, say what matters today is momentum. Like, you need to worry about the
mm.
moat later, but if you don't have momentum today, you'll never build a moat.
That's a nice way to put. But again, great insights, Tom, and again, thanks for sharing it. I think a lot of value there for people who are just raising or people who are building, and answering this question internally, externally, wherever they want to about Moat, right? Like I think good crash course for them, like in 10 minutes. So moving on to the lightning round section, right? So
Yeah.
again, 3 questions, Tom. Because it's lightning round, I'm going to ask like one question and you have to answer with whatever is on top of your mind, right? So let's get started with the first one. So Tom, like what is the one thing that has helped you shorten your learning curve?
I'm a really experiential learner. I like getting my hands dirty.
Mm,
Like, you know, I would just say do whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. And you learn a lot faster that way. You want to learn how to
mm,
program, don't read a textbook, try and program. You want to learn, how to be a salesperson or how to hire good salespeople, don't try to hire sales good people, just go and sell for a while.
mm.
Doing is learning, is the one thing I would say.
Nice, nice. Very interesting. On to the second one, right? So, what do you know about your work now that you wish you would have known when you first started?
Oh gosh, so much. A lot of that's venture specific though. Like,
Hmm,
I could tell you all about how to, talk to LPs and the people who invest in venture funds themselves. What I would maybe the kind of the most interesting thing for kind of your audience in this environment is just like seize every opportunity. Like
hmm,
I think you have to really be aggressive in a startup about how quickly you move and taking advantage of every opportunity in front of you. And the people who are going to lose in this environment are the people who have lower agency than others.
hmm.
Agency matters.
Nice, nice. And the third and last one, right? So Tom, again, you mentioned like learning by doing and experimenting and doing things practically is like more important. So like, what's your favorite AI tool that you're using like every day and you cannot live without?
I love one of our portfolio companies, Continue. They let me
Hmm.
switch between model providers very easily, and they have built this whole back end for allowing us as a firm or any firm to use custom data sources and custom
Hmm.
programming styles to do software development quickly. They're my go-to product for building. What we actually end up building is a lot of internal tools.
Hmm.
So to our discussion earlier, like I'm not a great programmer. I'm a
Hmm.
mediocre developer at best. But tools like Continue turn me into a superhero. Like I can build stuff that I would have had to shop out
Hmm.
to other people. I can iterate much more quickly because I don't have to you know wait a day and then have a phone call with someone and explain why it's not working. I can just like have a very short loop. So that's what I would say has been changed my life.
Nice. So great. I mean, like for anybody who's wanting to try out, I'll probably include the link to that company in the description so that people can go and check it out. But once again, Tom, again, thank you for taking time and sharing all these amazing
Yeah.
insights with us. I think it's been a really great discussion talking about like clicks to conversations and how from there till like what challenges companies might face in this new agentic era, right? And also talking about like how do you handle how companies should think about modes like when things become very competitive and like AI become being widely accepted and commoditized, right? So great conversation, and thanks a lot for taking time and doing
Hey,
this.
really appreciate. Thanks for having me on, Sunil. It was great to chat and good to see you again. And yeah, thanks for the time.
All right.